Like everyone else, I figured it would never happen to me, until it did in 1967. But I was lucky in a way. The station where I dug in had an experienced crash crew. They must have been. They sure got me out in a hurry. It will probably never happen again, but if it does, well, I like to think that every station has good crash crewmen. But have they? This station doesn't see F-4s very often, but I'm sure they know everything there is to know about their own aircraft. And like all good crews, they know it is good practice to watch for incidents that could lead to a crash, such as sparks, or skidding, excessive braking, or erratic maneuvers. And if they did have to make a rescue from the familiar aircraft, it would be fast and efficient. But what about unfamiliar aircraft? With the range of today's aircraft and the speed that they fly, you never know when you're going to get an unfamiliar visitor. So I wasn't too surprised when these crash crewmen asked if I had a minute to show them around my airplane. I was in kind of a hurry, but, well, I know from personal experience you can never tell when you're going to need help, so, like all smart aviators, I took the time. I mean, wouldn't everybody? Sure they would. As with all aircraft, the F-4 has certain danger areas that must be remembered. Since fire protection is based upon the airplane's maximum gross takeoff weight, the various fuel loading capabilities must be known. Internally, the F-4J contains a number of fuel cells in the fuselage and a tank in the forward section of the wing. These internal tanks can hold a total of 2,031 gallons. Notice the way the fuselage tanks cover the entire upper fuselage and most of the sides. Two external drop tanks will hold 370 gallons each. The F-4J carries a centerline drop tank which will hold 600 gallons. Thus, the maximum fuel load for this airplane is 3,377 gallons. As for hazard areas, on the F-4, the jet engine inlet suction danger area is located behind the cockpit on each side of the fuselage and is dangerous out to 25 feet. At full power, this distance is even greater. The engine exhaust area is dangerous on any high-performance jet aircraft out to a distance of 150 feet or more. The jettison danger area for each canopy is aft of the cockpit and includes the entire fuselage area out to about 6 feet on either side. Naturally, with a falling canopy, wind conditions must be considered. If the airplane has made a maximum braking stop, there is a danger area near each wheel due to hot brakes. Therefore, approach the wheel from the front or rear, thus avoiding the blowout plugs incorporated in the late model F-4s. Use caution on all F-4s with hot brakes, since the crash crew has no way of knowing the aircraft model. A hazard unique to the F-4 is the danger of burns from bleed air used in the boundary layer system. With the engine running, extremely hot air comes from the bleed air ducts located along the leading and trailing edges of the wings. If the wing fold area is broken off or folded, this hot air may blast from the 3 bleed air ducts in the wing tips. Inadvertent retraction of the landing gear is also a danger. Downlocks should be carried on the crash truck for this airplane. The LOX tank on the F-4 is located under the aft cockpit. If the gear is collapsed, it is impossible to reach the tank. Some F-4s have smoke abatement tanks. These are located below the middle fuselage fuel tank. But, as with other aircraft, smoke abatement chemicals are rarely carried. The tanks have been purged and, as such, are not toxic. Weapons being carried are, of course, always an extreme hazard, and the F-4J can carry an unusually wide assortment, including Sparrow and sidewinder missiles and a variety of explosive ordnance. These are carried on pylons mounted under the wings and fuselage. It must be remembered that even empty pylons may contain explosive separation devices that could cook off in a fire, so that these areas should be avoided. The Navy F-4 does not carry a 20mm gun internally. It may carry a gatling gun in an external pod mounted under the cockpits. And the Air Force F-4, however, does carry a gun internally. In any case, the forward firing zone on any high-performance jet should be avoided. The approach to an F-4 after a crash is like that for any other airplane, taking into consideration its special danger areas. If the engine is running, give the pilot the cutoff sign. He might be dazed, but not unconscious and able to respond. However, should he not respond, the crash crewman must shut down the engine. If the landing gear is intact, reach inside door 81L, located on the underside of the F-4, and rotate the left engine throttle linkage in a counterclockwise direction. If the airplane is surrounded by flames, you'll have to clear a way in using standard procedures. That will probably be the MB-5 using light water. The cockpit area, of course, should be kept cool not only to protect the crewmen, but to prevent cook-off of the seats. As a last resort, the engines can be stopped by injecting water or foam into the inlets. Do not use a direct stream into the inlet. Either use a spray or bounce the stream off the sides of the inlet. All crash trucks carry a ladder designed to reach the cockpit. On an F-4, you can also reach the cockpit by releasing the internal ladder, but it makes a difficult work platform, and instead, the portable ladder should be used. When the canopies are closed, one of the critical points of a rescue is entry to the cockpits. So do not raise either canopy if either crew member has pulled his ejector face curtain or his alternate ejection handle. Since it is always hazardous to jettison an F-4 canopy, a normal entry should always be made if at all possible. On the F-4, exterior canopy release buttons are located on the port side below each canopy. Pushing the open button causes the canopy to unlatch, and it will automatically raise by pneumatic pressure. To open the canopy manually, a manual unlock handle is located below each cockpit. Depressing the button on the handle causes it to pop out. Depressing the open button and twisting the manual unlock handle unlocks the canopy. The canopy must then be pushed open. Notice that the canopy will not stay open. It must be propped open. All F-4s have been modified to provide a connecting link between the canopy interlock block and the primary firing system. With the modification, the seat is safe at all times when the canopy and the interlock system are intact. But when the canopy leaves the aircraft, the seat is armed to eject. So, warning. Do not shear the canopy off because this pulls the interlock block and safety pin, and the seat is armed to fire. If the canopy is off, a safety pin must be inserted in the sear of the primary firing system, which is located behind each headrest. All crash crewmen should carry these pins. Warning: do not touch the interlock block before the safety pin is inserted, as this may cause ejection. Also remember, when reaching into the cockpit, do not pull the face curtain ejection handle. And do not pull the secondary ejection handle. In the event forcible entry is required, the canopies should be chopped through close to the metal frame, starting at the forward corner. Chilling with CO2 may be required, since the canopies on this airplane are thick and will not shatter or break. Using a power saw is quicker and does not leave jagged edges. Since a forcible entry does not remove the canopy, the primary firing system is still intact and does not have to be safetied on modified aircraft. As a last resort, entrance can be made by jettisoning the canopy. A canopy jettison handle is located on the port side below the forward cockpit. The handle is held by a clip. To operate, the handle is pulled to the full length of the lanyard, about 20 inches, then yanked hard. This jettisons both canopies. Remember, it also arms the seat ejection systems, and the primary firing system in each cockpit must be safe before rescue can begin. If either crewman is unconscious, it is possible he may not be receiving oxygen, and you must quickly prevent suffocation by removing his oxygen mask. First, raise the sun visor on his helmet. Do not remove the helmet. Unfasten the crewman's oxygen mask. You should have memorized the 3 types of fasteners, so whichever type he is wearing will be totally familiar. It is unlikely you will encounter a full-pressure suit, but you should know how to open it if you do. The quickest way to shut off the flow of oxygen is to pull the yellow apple located on the left rear corner of each crewman's ejection seat. Warning: do not disconnect or cut the oxygen line until after the oxygen mask is removed, since this would automatically cut off the crewman's only source of oxygen. If either engine is running, it should be shut down immediately to prevent the possibility of fire or explosion. On the Navy F-4, the throttles are located in the forward cockpit only. The throttles are pulled aft to the idle position, then outboard past a detent and all the way aft. The engine master switches are located next to the throttles. These switches have to be lifted before they can be pulled back to the off position. Before the crewman can be rescued, the leg restraints must be released by means of a lever located on the left forward side of the seat bucket. And the shoulder harness must be disconnected. The 2 hip coke fittings are first disconnected. They may be difficult to see because of the crewman's survival gear. Coke fittings on Navy parachutes operate by lifting the locking latch upward, and with the same motion, rotating the knurled locking bar downward. This downward motion separates the fittings. If they do not, then separate manually. Coke fittings used by the Air Force are slightly different, but they operate in much the same manner by lifting the locking latch upward and with the same motion rotating the knurled locking bar downward. This downward motion separates the fittings. When disconnecting the two shoulder fittings, be careful not to pull the parachute D-ring. If necessary, the parachute harness can be cut with a rescue knife. As a last resort, the crewman can be released from the seat by pulling the emergency harness release handle. But this leaves 60 pounds of parachute and survival gear attached to the crewman, and it is extremely difficult to lift him from the cockpit. The normal operation on the F-4 is to lift the air crewman out in much the same manner as in all high-performance jets, and the procedure should be practiced from time to time by all crash crewmen. It's a three-man job. The best method is for one man to straddle the nose or to stand on the edges of the cockpit, while the other men remain on the ground or on a ladder. When the gear is down, the cockpit is several feet above the ground, and air crewmen as well as crash crewmen have been seriously injured when they fell, so caution must be used. In case the crewmen are trapped in an inverted airplane, the nose must be lifted before the canopies can be opened. The fastest way is to use a crane attached to the nose wheel gear or to any strong structural member. As a last resort, dig under the canopies, although the position of the aft canopy makes it very difficult to reach by this method. Chopping through the fuselage is almost impossible due to the many stringers, consoles, and equipment. If time is available, after the crewmen have been rescued, all hazardous equipment should be safetied. Crash crews should carry these safety pins. For example, a safety pin can be inserted in the face curtain ejection handle. It is not necessary to safety the ejection seat firing system unless the canopy has been removed. Caution: an unpinned drogue gun will fire if the trip rod is pulled. When working in either cockpit, be careful not to pull the emergency canopy jettison handle. If not already done, the downlocks should be placed on the landing gear. If the tail hook is down, it should be raised and secured before the airplane is moved. When it comes to the actual fighting of fires on the F-4, a couple of points should be remembered. At my own station, crews run through procedures on an old airplane carcass. In general, standard fighting procedures are used. But it must be remembered that because of the fuselage fuel tanks, penetration to the engines can be accomplished only in a relatively narrow area just above the upper wing roots. I guess to sum the whole thing up, it does take a certain amount of time and trouble to check out an unfamiliar airplane, both for the air crewman and the crash crewman. I know why the air crewman shouldn't mind taking the time, but about the only motive the crash crewman has is his own sense of responsibility and pride in his crew and in himself. When the time comes, he wants to do everything he can to get the crewman out of that airplane fast and with a minimum danger to himself. The only way to do this is by knowing in advance exactly what you're going to do. Obviously, that fellow does. Well, maybe not.